Well, we are thrilled about gathering around the Word of God again, and we're wanting to saturate in the Word of God and find out what the truth really is. And of course, we're looking for Jesus to speak to us, and we want Him to come and live His life through us. And we're discovering the style of the cross style. We spent last class period dealing with the concept, trying to initiate the thought in our mind of what Jesus is really all about, and realizing that this is the depth of His personality and His heart and His soul. That the very nature of Jesus is wrapped up in this style of the cross. We discovered as we kind of scanned the event of the cross and even the resurrection that what this is all about is not just an event. That the writers of the gospel are trying desperately to communicate to us that this goes way beyond just an event. That it is an event, there's no problem with that. And that needs to be. There is no redemption without it. But when you get right down to it, the cross for Jesus was a style. It was a constant thought process. He was always into the style of the cross. See, He was always pouring His life out. He never ever lived for Himself. It was give yourself up, pour yourself out, bleed, suffer, and die. Always be redemptive. Always reach out. Everything He did. Second member of the Trinity leaped off of His throne, emptied Himself of all that He had as God. And what was that all about? It was about the style of the cross. See, that's the very nature of God Himself. So if we're going to experience the nature of God, if we're going to know the very heartbeat of the Father, if we're going to know and be partakers of the divine nature, we're going to have to experience this cross style in our lives. This is what the play out of the holiness of God looks like. This is what happens when a man is filled with God and holiness is experienced. This is the way it spills out in his everyday life. This is what comes from his fingertips. This is what flows from his face. This is how he interacts with his world. It's always about pour yourself out, give yourself up, never ever live for yourself, always be redemptive. It's about the style of the cross. This is the essence of it. This is what Jesus was constantly calling His disciples to. We saw it in the resurrection and in the crucifixion. That the whole deal was not just about an event. It went way beyond an event. Oh, it was an event. We're not against that. Yes, Jesus did die. We have to have that. Yes, He was raised from the dead. That's absolutely essential. But we're experiencing the fact that it was way beyond that. For Jesus, it was not just an event. It was a constant spill out of His life. Jesus died a crucified death because He lived a crucified life. Hey, anybody who knows Jesus knows that this is the way He is. And when we see Him on a cross, we say, there He goes again. Because this was common for Him. This was always about give your life up. The kind of people He dealt with within His ministry. I mean, He dealt with lepers. He got involved with a Roman centurion, person of another race that you should hate. He got involved with Gentile, Canaanite woman. He got involved with people who couldn't help Him in His career. He did miracles and told people, don't tell anybody. He fed 5,000 poor men besides women and children. Instead of rubbing shoulders with the elite and the aristocratic and the educated and building relationships with them, He poured His life out, always giving Himself up. How can I be redemptive? Risking Himself, constantly giving Himself away. It's what He was all about. It's the fundamental of His nature. And if you and I are going to experience the nature of God, if we're going to be indwelt by holiness itself, the nature of God, how will it spill out? What will it look like? How will it interact with our neighborhood? What kind of relationships will come from it? How will it literally look in everyday view of practical living? It's going to look like the style of the cross, man. It's going to be redemptive. It'll be all about pour your life out. Never ever live for yourself. Give yourself away. You cannot live for yourself and be a kingdom person. It's anti everything that's found in the kingdom of God. It's a call to the absolute total death of our lives. It's the style of the cross. This is what Jesus called His disciples to. Now, you were to saturate in chapter 16. And we want to spend some time today looking in an overall view of chapter 16. And maybe you're wondering why we started at chapter 16, and that's very easy to tell you. It's because chapter 16 marks something of a shift in the whole ministry of Jesus. And if you do an overall study of the book of Matthew, you can easily see this. If we understand the timing, From chapter 16 on to the end of the chapter is about 6 months. In other words, the last 6 months of the life of Jesus Christ are being displayed in these chapters. Several chapters, of course, are spent on the last week. But as we look at from about chapter 21 on to the end is the last week of his life. So from chapter 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, we are looking at a several month period. 6 months of the ministry of Jesus Christ. It's really important then because it's given so much space. It really seems to be essential in the mind and heart of Matthew as he's writing to the Jews to convince them that Jesus was and is the kingly Messiah. So it must be important to us. We must grasp its truth. So chapter 16, well, it actually begins somewhat in chapter 15. It's suggested at least. But in chapter 16, there is a mark, there is a distinction, there is a change, a shift that takes place in the entirety of the ministry of Jesus Christ. See, up to this time, he had a strategy. Yeah, he had a program. He had a way he was going at it. According to Matthew chapter 11, he spent most of his time in 3 major cities, Chorazin, Bethsaida, and Capernaum. The idea, obviously, was that if he could win these 3 cities, these 3 major cities, they could become an evangelistic force that would literally sweep out into all of Judaism and eventually the world. So he spent most of his mighty deeds, most of his miracles were done right there in those 3 cities. Spent his time ministering in those 3 cities. We know that Capernaum was his adopted hometown. It was the hometown of Peter. And we know that he set up his world evangelistic headquarters right there in Capernaum. It became the base for operation, probably was Peter's home. So here is a strategy that Jesus is using in terms of ministry. He's launching an aggressive attack upon 3 major cities. A second prong to his ministerial attack, his ministry program, was win the leaders of Israel. Hey, if he could win the leaders of Israel, all of Israel would fall into line. As goes the leaders of Israel, so will go Israel. So if he could bring them on board, if they could catch the vision, if they could see this thing, hey, he would have an evangelistic base that wouldn't quit, man. All of Judaism would link arms. The 3 major cities would be an evangelistic explosion, and he could literally reach out, and a whole Gentile world would be brought into the kingdom of God, and the kingdom would be established. And this was his evangelistic thrust. It's somewhat encouraging as you look in chapter 11 that his ministry has collapsed at his feet. Oh, I'm sorry for him, but it certainly does encourage me. The strategy, the idea, the approach, it was so sound and basic, but hey, it hasn't worked. He's come to a point where all of this is at his feet, man. He's in total absolute failure. He has not made it in his ministry. The 3 major cities have snubbed him. He was just one more budding Messiah on the street corner, attempting to do some magic tricks that would impress them. They were too busy wrapped up in their fishing business. Hey, they didn't have time for all of this. Just on they went, doing their own thing. And they simply ignored him, had nothing to do with him. So that evangelistic approach failed. The leaders of Israel, certainly, he has not won them. In fact, by the time you get to chapter 16, they are after his blood, man. They want to crucify him. They want him dead, brother. They're making plots and plans on how they're going to kill him and trying to get an inside track with a betrayer. So all the plot is in place by the time you get here. So his ministry has failed. And in chapter 11, with his ministry at his feet, you know what he does? Oh, it's phenomenal. You know what he does? He breaks into an overwhelming prayer of praise. I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth. Hey, you're in charge. This has never been my deal anyhow. This wasn't about my ministry or my strategy. This is about you, Father, and what you want to get done. And he breaks into this amazing song of praise, saying, Father, you've taken the wise things and you've hid them. You've hidden them from the wise and the prudent, and you've revealed them to babes. Babes, those are the ones that are going to get in on this. Oh, Father, I thank you. And then he stretches out his hands. It's an amazing thing. Stretches out his hands and says, come unto me, all you who are labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. So the strategy of ministry has changed. It's changed from win 3 major cities. It's changed from win the leadership of Israel. And it's changed to anybody, any place, anywhere, under all circumstances. Hey, one-on-one. Anybody, everybody, every place, everywhere. Anybody that wants to come. And for the first times in his life, in those following chapters, he begins to move into Gentile territory and minister to Gentile people. You realize up to chapter 10, he had given instructions to his disciples just to go to the house of Israel. No, this is not for anybody else. Just for the house of Israel. And he limited his ministry there. But now, after chapter 11, the door is wide open. Hey, things have changed. His whole perspective and thrust on ministry is now going to be different. And we see it begin to unfold. Now with that as a background, we begin to understand then that he's coming down to his last 6 months of his ministry. Galilean ministry is over. His strategy is now changed. And he's really spending this last 6 months of his ministry saying, hey, I want to minister to you disciples. You've got to get this. Hey, you've got to lock in, man. I've got to get through to you. Whatever happens, you've got to understand this whole basic fundamental of the kingdom of God that I'm establishing. You've got to get a hold of it. So he focuses his whole attention on them, these 12 disciples. How is he going to do that? Oh, he's going to set aside time. He's going to spend time with them. In fact, he's going into Gentile territory in an attempt to get away from the crowds and the pressure of Judaism, and to just kind of let this thing cool off. And the crowds, hey, he is disillusioned with the crowds. They haven't come through, man. Hey, it's been touch my flesh, make me feel good. Hey, help me with my problem. But it hasn't been, hey, we want in on the kingdom. See, it's all been a selfish motivating thing. The crowds, they're fickle, man. One time they're after the miracles, the next time they're crying for his blood at Mount Calvary. So you see, you can't shape it up. Hey, he's done with the crowds, brother. He's focusing in on his 12 disciples. Hey, you are the boys I'm going to depend on. Hey, you are the guys that have got to come through for me. You are the boys that the church is going to rest upon your shoulder. You are the guys that I got to make it. I got to get you ready. I got to get you ready. So he moves into talking to them about the special subject of his cross. In fact, in chapter 16, it's down in verse 23, verse 21, he's going to give his first prediction concerning his death and his resurrection. He's going to launch into this thing, and the language there is very specific, that it's not going to be a one-time shot. It's going to unfold. And what's going to be so amazing is that as he really zeroes in on his disciples, and he begins this in chapter 16, chapter after chapter after chapter is all going to focus on this. He's not going to get off this subject. You got to get this. He's not going to get off this subject. I'm telling you, everything he's going to do from chapter 16 on into all the rest of the chapters is all going to be focused on this one thing. The style of the cross, guys. Hey, bleed, suffer, and die. Pour your life out. We're going to win our world. But it's not going to be by hotshot programs. It's not going to be by quartets wowing the crowd. It's not going to be by charismatic personalities. It's not going to be by church growth strategies. It's not going to be, man, by the skill of our talent. It's not going to be by, hey, our ability to persuade people. I'm telling you, we're going to win our world. Redemption is going to come, but it's going to come by bleeding, suffering, and dying. I am a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah. And man, I'm calling you in on that. Come on, guys. Join me in bleeding, suffering, dying, the style of the cross. It's the essence of what he's all about. And every chapter, every parable he tells is going to come back to this. Hey, every scene that takes place, the rich young ruler, every scene you want to name, he brings them right back to this. Bleed, suffer, and die. Pour your life out. Give yourself up, guys. It's the only chance we got. It's the only way we're going to win a world, fellas. Hey, this is it. Come on, bleed, suffer, and die, guys. Join me in this. It's the fundamental. It's the style of the cross. Chapter 22 is going to be filled with trick questions. The leaders of Israel are going to try to get at him every single time. He's going to bring them back to one single issue. One single issue. Bleed, suffer, and die. Pour your life out. The style of the cross. Jesus is really hooked at it. It's the total, absolute focus. So everything that you read, everything that you see in chapter 16 through to the end of the book is going to be seen under the umbrella with the focus of, through the lens of, this one single factor, the style of the cross. Everything must be seen in light of that. Bleed, suffer, and die. It's what he's calling his disciples to. Now this starts in chapter 16. Again, it's certainly indicated in chapter 15. For instance, in chapter 15, in verse 21, you can look at it in your Bibles. Chapter 15, verse 21. It says, "Then Jesus went out from there and departed to the region of Tyre and Sidon." Tyre and Sidon, Gentile territory. First time he's done that. Hey, he's taken them out of there, man, and he's gone into Gentile territory. Why? Get away. Hey, wants to get his disciples. See, it's the beginning process of locking in on his disciples and training and teaching them about the dynamic of the style of the cross. Now, we come to chapter 16. We're going to skip, for sake of time, the first paragraph or so. I want you to go down to verse 13. It's in verse 13 that you begin to see that they're in Gentile territory still, or again. They've gone back and now they've come back over across the sea. And they're in Gentile territory. Caesarea Philippi, to be exact. And you know this account so well. Oh my. Verse 13. Look at it. "When Jesus came into the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, 'Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?'" Jesus has got his disciples alone in Gentile territory. Crowds are not there. He's all by himself with them. He's focused in on them, and he's looking them in the eye, and he's asking them a question. I want to propose to you, this is the preliminary question. The preliminary question. This is the question that really is kind of the beginning of the whole thing. He's not getting to the heart of the matter yet. He's just beginning to get into it. You see, the disciples have been in a massive training program. They've had on-the-job training for 2.5 years with Jesus. Hey, he has given them his power. He sent them out. They have gone out to duplicate his miracles and to be a part of the ministry flow and to get a feel for the whole thing. And of course, they got sidetracked. Yeah, they got sidetracked on fame and what people thought about them, and they got sidetracked on all the power they had and how great it was to be at the center of attention and people wanting your autographs, and so they'd kind of missed it. And so Jesus is going to bring them back to the style of the cross. Lose your life, guys. Hey, this is not about fame and popularity. This is not about who likes you or doesn't like you. This is about bleed, suffer, die. Hey, minister, pour your life out. Always be redemptive. So he's always coming back to that. So after 2.5 years of that, yeah, they've been in training, and in school, they've never had one single test. Not one single test. Now, Jesus has brought them together and he's going to give them a test. He's a little nervous about it. How are they going to react? Will they come through? And it's not going to be a true and false questions. It's not going to be multiple choice kind of stuff, fill in the blank kind of thing. The test is going to be one essay question. Hey, you're either in or you're out. This is 2.5 years of training, brother. And hey, you pass this, you're in. You don't pass it, you're out of here. See, the whole deal hangs on the answer to this one single essay question that he's going to ask them. He's nervous about it. Can you see his brow? It's probably a bit wrinkled. He's wondering, oh man, are they going to come through? Have they gotten it? Do they know what they're talking about? Have they heard anything that I've talked to them about at all? Did they get this? What do they really believe? But so he doesn't just move into it, too nervous to do that. He kind of eases into it from the side way. And the preliminary question is, who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Hey, what's going on downtown? What's the rumors around the church? What's the grapevine of the church have to say? Yeah, that's always interesting, isn't it? What's the rumors? What's in the latest publication from the denomination? Hey, what do they have to say? Oh, what's their angle on this? What's their take? What are the people downtown talking about? Look at the answer. Verse 14. Oh, they said, some say you're John the Baptist. Yeah, John the Baptist. The one who thought that was Herod Antipas. He'd cut off the head of John the Baptist, you remember, due to the dance of his stepdaughter, who really wasn't his stepdaughter at all. His wife, his so-called wife, was his mistress. And due to the promise he'd made that he'd give her up to half the kingdom if she pleased him. And she came, due to her mother, of course, and requested the head of John the Baptist. So, hey, he had the head of John the Baptist on a platter to her, and he thought that Jesus was John the Baptist come back from the dead to get him, which of course was a dumb idea, because Jesus had been alive before John the Baptist was dead, but Herod Antipas didn't have sense enough to know that. So he thought Jesus was John the Baptist come back to get him. Oh, they said, some say you're Elijah. Elijah, of course, that's the name of the forerunner. They had been trained that right out of Malachi chapter 5. That there was going to come one called Elijah. That is, Elijah was going to be raised from the dead, is what they taught. Yeah, he was going to be raised from the dead and would stand about 10 feet tall and would drip with the dew of the resurrection and would be the forerunner of the Christ. He'd be kind of the hit man for the Messiah and kind of straighten everybody out. And when he got everybody straightened out, the Messiah would come. So they were looking for this Messiah, this forerunner to the Messiah. And some people thought Jesus was the forerunner, the Elijah. Getting things ready for the Messiah to show up. Oh, others say Jeremiah. Now Jeremiah, it was reported that the old prophet Jeremiah, before he died, buried the Ark of the Covenant. And the legend was that Jeremiah was going to be raised from the dead, dig up the Ark of the Covenant, and of course bring it into Jerusalem. And when he did, there would be great reform. Everybody would shape up, and Israel would be back on track. So they thought maybe Jesus was Jeremiah, come back from the dead, and they were just waiting for him to bring the Ark of the Covenant into the temple. Or, it says, verse 14, one of the prophets. They believe you're one of the prophets, or one of the prophets. Maybe not a prophet raised from the dead, but a prophet that God has finally added on to. And you realize that for 400 years there had been no prophets. And now this was a whole new deal for these people. So they thought, hey, we've read the Old Testament. We've heard about these old-time prophets. Jesus seems to fit that bill, so he's probably one like them, a prophet sent from God. Jesus said, fine, that's all good information. Appreciate it. Appreciate your insight. But, verse 15, he said to them, who do you say that I am? Wow. Now we're down to the real question. This is not the preliminary question. No. This is the prominent question. This is the question that really matters. This is the bottom line of all things. See, miracles, not the bottom line. Hey, casting out demons, not the bottom line, man. Hey, all of those can be duplicated. Hey, many people are going to come and say, hey, I cast out demons in your name. And Lord, hey, we did it all. Yeah. But Jesus said, I never knew you. So that's not the bottom line. See, here's the bottom line. This is the prominent question. This is the question that matters. And he's led them right into the heart of everything he wants to talk to them about. Who do you say that I am? That really, really matters. Now, as you begin to look at this forcibly, you begin to wonder why Jesus would ask them this. See, this question, who do you say that I am? That kind of question is, well, it's an evangelistic approach. You understand that? See, if you want to do a street meeting, if you want to preach to ungodly people, if you really want to get with it down there on the street and people who don't know Jesus, hey, this is the question to ask them. Yeah, you lean into their face and say, hey, what do you think about Jesus? And you bring them forcibly into the issue of Christ. And you show them about Jesus. You build him up. You talk about how great he is. You show his worthiness. You show how he's the Redeemer and the lover of their souls. And then you ask them, you've got to do something about Jesus. So what do you think about this Christ? See, that's an evangelistic approach. But isn't it interesting? Jesus is not talking to street people. See, this is not a multitude. It's not a bunch of ungodly people that he's trying to win. This is not speaking to the masses downtown. Come on. These are not speaking to ungodly people. You know who he's talking to here? He's talking to 12 disciples. Now these guys have cast out demons, raised the dead, duplicated all the miracles of Jesus Christ. They had received something of the power that Jesus contained within himself, and they'd gone out and done all this stuff, man. They're the key people. Listen, if they aren't in, then hey, Jesus has nobody. I mean, really, he is down to these guys. I mean, there's nobody left. You remember at one time that Jesus turned and said, hey, are you going to go too? Because everybody's left me, man. There's nobody left here. I mean, everybody's gone. All the multitudes have turned their back. I suppose you're going to too. And they said, we have nowhere to go. So Jesus is down to these 12 disciples. See, this is what, this really matters, man. And he's preaching to these guys who are supposed to have it all together. They're the ushers. They're the boys that do the preaching. They're the boys that do the work. These are the guys that are following closely. These are the guys that Jesus is depending on. And he turns to them after 2.5 years of ministry, looks them in the face and says, who do you say that I am? Like this, we need to come back to this, guys. This is fundamental. This really matters. This is the prominent bottom line question. Hey, maybe that would be good for us. Hey, here we are in a classroom preparing for ministry. Here we are. We're the guys. We know what it is to have a Christian experience. We've done the preaching. Hey, we're the guys that are going to go out and do it. Hey, we're the boys that are studying the scriptures and deciphering theology. And see, we're not a bunch of street people. Come on. Hey, we got this nailed down. We're the boys who have experienced Christ, and we're after this. You know, why would you ask this question of us? And yet again, Jesus is asking this question, not to the guys in the multitude, but he's asking this to the board members, to the church members, to the guys who got it all together, to the guys who were sitting in the college preparing for ministry. And the question is, who do you say that I am? Like, this really, really matters, guys. Okay, bottom line stuff. Think this through again. Let's come back to the basics. What does this, how is this question going to be answered in your life? Who do you say that I am? Come on, guys, think about this. You got to get this one down. So Jesus is asking his disciples to rethink this and to go over this again for their lives, because this is really, really dominant. If this isn't settled, nothing is settled. So this is the prominent question of the hour. Now, you know what happened, of course. It's in verse 16. Simon Peter, representing the disciples, jumps to his feet and says, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. Verse 16. You're the Christ, the Son of the living God. We want to come back later and analyze that statement, but wow, in another class session, but wow, what a statement. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. It was a full-fledged, down-to-it, all-out right answer. I mean, spilling out of the heart. Simon Peter was dead on. And Jesus was, whoa, he was impressed. Look at verse 17. Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah. Flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. Hey, you didn't get this from downtown, man. This didn't come from the grapevine. You've been messing around in the mind of God. That's where you got this. You've been messing around in the mind of God. The mind of God has literally been expressed to you. God has brought revelation to you, and you have seen it. You have seen it, Peter. I'm impressed. In fact, look what he does. Verse 18. And I tell you, Peter, I'm going to build my church on this kind of stuff. Hey, this is the kind of foundation, oh rock that you are, that I'm going to build my church on, man. And I'm going to give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatever you bind on earth will be bound. And he just goes on and on with this. Jesus is really impressed. So this really was a great answer. I mean, you want to stand back and say, yay, for Peter, man. You came through, boy. This is good. Hey, Peter was right on. For once, Peter opened his mouth and said the right thing. Woo! Good for you, Peter. But I want you to go to verse 21. Now, it's not in question form, but it's a key verse. And it really is involving a question. See, he came to them with the preliminary question. This is kind of easing into it. Then he came to the prominent question. This is the one that has quotes around it, is underlined, and is highlighted with a marker. Because this one really, really matters. Who do you say that I am? And then he comes down to this third question. And again, it's not in question form in the scriptures, but it really is a question. And it's the preceding question. It's a question that proceeds out of all of this. It's a question that comes from all of this. It's an inevitable question. In fact, it's going to be the focus from here on out. See, Jesus turns to his disciples and talks to them about his bleeding, suffering, dying. What kind of question is he asking in this? Look at verse 21. From that time, Jesus began to show to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and scribes and be killed and be raised the third day. This is the preceding question. What's he dealing with here? He's dealing with the content of his messiahship. See, it's one thing to say, oh yes, I believe you're the Messiah, which Peter did. It's one thing to stand and say, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. Good, Peter. I can see that you believe that. Well, Peter must have been a little irate. Do I believe that? Well, Jesus, good night. I don't even know why you would ask us this question in verse 15. Haven't we proved our loyalty? Haven't we proved, Peter must have said, haven't we proved that we really do believe in you? Hey, I left my family, Jesus, and I've traveled all over the countryside. Hey, I left my fishing business. I could have been a millionaire by this time, man. Oh, I could have had a whole bunch of boats, man. But I left my fishing business to follow you, and I've lived out of Days Inn, and I've been out at McDonald's most of the time. I've lived out of a suitcase, been all over the countryside tromping around, left my family, man. And you know why? Because I believe you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And then you come along and say, hey, who do you believe that I am? What do you think we believe, man? Did you think we didn't know you're the Christ, the Son of the living God? Why else would we travel around the countryside and give ourselves to you like we have if we didn't really believe that? Yes, we believe that. We've proved we believe that. Jesus must have looked at them and said, hey, you got me convinced. I can see it in your eye. You believe I'm the Messiah. Hey, that issue is settled. That issue is settled. We'll never bring that up again. That's not going to be discussed. See, in the chapters that come out of this, in the next chapters, they're not going to discuss, are you the Messiah? Are you not the Messiah? You know, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. See, they are absolutely convinced of that. They believe that. So that's not the pressing issue at this point. Now that they've gone beyond that, the pressing issue is, what kind of Messiah am I? That's the question. What's the content of my messiahship? That's the question. What's the makeup? What's the style of my messiahship? See, that's the big question. Again, it's one thing to stand up and say, hey, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. It's another thing to know what that means, what the content of that is, how that shapes out what literally comes from that. See, that's the big issue. That's what really matters. Hey, do you know what it is to be a first grade teacher? Huh, you say, yeah. Teaching first graders? Yeah, those little tots? No. Hey, no problem. I know what it is to be a first grade teacher. What you do is you got about 30 squalling kids around you, man, and you slap a couple of them upside the head, stand some others in the corner, and you read stories to them and go for recess. That's all that is. No big deal. Obviously, you've never been a first grade teacher. See, you don't know what the content of being a first grade teacher is. You don't know what it means to day after day after day have the lives in your hand, mold them, teaching them how to read, giving them their first steps in mathematics. You don't understand what that means, see? You don't know the content at all about shaping lives and getting involved. You don't know what you're talking about. Do you know what it is to be a pastor? Oh, yeah, I know what the pastor... You know what the content of being a pastor is? Yeah, no big deal, man. Hey, what do pastors do? I mean, they stay up late night and watch the Late Show, and, they sleep in the morning and give a 15-minute talk on Sunday and collect their paycheck. No big deal. See, you don't know what it is to be a pastor. You don't know what it is to get a call at 3 a.m. in the morning and go down to the hospital and minister to somebody who's dying. You don't know what it is to be with a parent who's aching and agonizing over their son and his drug problem. See, you don't know what it is to see people headed for trouble and warning them and caring for them and dying for them, literally, and yet you can't stop them and know exactly what's going to happen and that they're going to come to you weeping one day and you see it all happening. See, you don't know what it is. Do you know what it is to be the Christ, the Son of the living God? Oh, Yeah, Jesus, we know what that is, they said. Oh yeah, by their very attitude they said it. Oh yeah, we know what it is to be the Christ, the Son of the living God. What that means is, yeah, the Messiah. Well, yeah, we got it all figured out. See, we know that what you're going to do is you're going to flip around the countryside, zap some people, man. Hey, do some fantastic miracles, zap people, build your fame and popularity. Eventually, of course, you're going to get everything together, march down there to Rome, flip Caesar off that throne. Man, you're going to sit on that throne yourself. You're going to give us thrones. You're going to eat chocolate, not get fat. And hey, we're going to have a big time. And everybody's going to bow our feet, and that's what that means. He said, hey man, you haven't got the right. See, you missed it. See, I was afraid of that. You don't know what the content of my Messiah. See, you believe I'm the Messiah. Yeah, you got that one down. You're the Christ, the Son of the living God, and I can see that you really do believe that. But man, you don't know what the content. You don't know what that means. You don't know what the heart of that is. Let me tell you what the content of my Messiahship is. I'm a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah. I'm a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah. I'm telling you, I'm going to a cross. Now, look at verse 21. Do you see the words? You don't have to be a Greek scholar to understand this. From that time, Jesus began to show to his disciples. From that time. Now, what would you gather from that? Well, this is present tense with continual action. From that time. In other words, Jesus was starting something here that was just going to unfold and was going to continue and was going to move on and on and on. In other words, he's not going to quit. It's like he was pulling the plug, man, and there's an avalanche just gushing out and wasn't going to be able to stop it. It was just going to go on and on. Now we know this was the first prediction of his death and his resurrection, and that he was literally going to take this information and spill it through constantly, going over it and over it and over it, and this was going to be the issue from now on, trying to get his disciples ready for the event of the cross and teaching them about the cross style. Guys, the heart of Messiahship is bleeding, suffering, and dying. Won't you join me? Won't you join me? Won't you roll your sleeves up and join me in the bleeding, suffering, dying style of Messiahship? I'm asking you to be my disciple. So he begins in verse 21, and it's going to continue and unfold and unfold. And again, everywhere you go from now on to the end of the book, every verse, every situation, every parable, man, every scene, rich young ruler scene, Mount of Transfiguration, anything you want to talk about is all going to come back to this one single factor. He's a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah. And if you're going to be his disciple, you're going to be a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah. Guys, the only way we're going to win our world is bleed, suffer, and die. Not hotshot programs, not big wing-ding deals, man. It isn't going to be the big crusades that are going to pull it off. It's going to be rolling up our sleeves, intersecting the need and the hurt of our world. And when you intersect the need and hurt of our world, man, a cross is produced. And when a cross is produced, hey, blood is required, yours. And it's there that redemption takes place. Bleed, suffer, and die. Did you get it? It's not going to be the quartets, man. It's not going to be the hotshot talent. It's not going to be the big name stuff. It's not going to be names and bright lights and microphones. Come on. How are we going to win our world? We're going to intersect our world at the point of their need. And the minute we intersect our world at the point of their need, a cross is produced. And the minute a cross is produced, man, blood is spilled and redemption takes place. And God is calling us to be an extension of his bleeding process, the style of the cross. I'm calling you to that. Now, how did they respond to that? Well, you can see how they responded. It's in verse 22. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Now, the word rebuke there is the same identical Greek word that is translated from, the Greek word that is used when Jesus talks to demons. In other words, this is strong. This is not light. This is not, oh, yeah, Jesus, I know you're kidding. It's not that kind of a deal. This is in your face, man. This is, hey, I'm not going to have that. No way is that going to happen. He's in their face. Peter's definitely coming down hard on Jesus, saying, no, that we will not have, we do not want, we will not tolerate, we will not put up with a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah. Nope, Jesus, out of the question. It's not going to be that way. So Peter actually rebukes him and tells him it's not going to be that way. Now Jesus is, can you see this? Jesus has just poured out his heart, man. He's been waiting all this time. Last 6 months of his ministry, it's really heavy on him. He's got his disciples aside. He splits himself down the middle and opens himself up to these guys. Says, guys, let me share with you the heart of what it is, what it really means to be a Messiah. Here's what I'm into. Here's what I'm about. Here's how the whole thing is going to unfold. And what do? No, Jesus, not going to have it. We don't want a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah. Now again, why would they be that way? Why wouldn't they want a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah? Why are they so dead set against that? Oh, that's easy, isn't it? And the reason it's so easy is because you can see it in the rest of the chapter. See, they knew that if Jesus was a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah, that he was going to call them to that too, and they would have to be bleeding, suffering, dying disciples. They didn't want to do that. Hey, I'm not into bleeding, suffering, and dying. No. Hey, listen, I don't do windows. I don't mow yards. Listen, I'm into softness. I'm into comfort. I'm into relaxation. I'm into ease. I'm into having everything my way. I'm into fame and popularity. I'm into financial prosperity. I'm into having my body healed. I'm not into pain. I'm not into losing my life. No, Jesus. Hey, this should be, Jesus, benefit me. Lord, what are you going to do for me? Hey, do some magic tricks for me. Hey, make me feel better. Hey, solve my problems. Hey, get me out of my mess. Hey, see, that's what I'm into. Jesus says, hey guys, I'll tell you what I'm calling you to. I'm not calling you to that. I'm not that kind of Messiah, man. You got the wrong picture. I'm into bleeding, suffering, and dying. I'm into pour your life out, give yourself up. I'm into never, ever live for yourself. That's what I'm into. And that's exactly what I'm calling you to. Now you see this unfolding in verse 24. You know, of course, that Jesus rebuked Peter in verse 23, said, get behind me, Satan, because he was on the satanic pattern, the satanic thought process, not the Christian process, not the Spirit of God process. So in verse 24, Jesus turns to them and says, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. So what are we into here, man? Hey, we're into bleeding, suffering, and dying. I'm telling you guys, and I'm calling you. If you want to follow me, if you want to be a part, if you want to come and be in on what I'm in on, hey, you guys have joined me. If you want to be a part of the kingdom, I'm setting up a kingdom. And the foundation, the fundamental, the basic layer, the essence of that kingdom is bleeding, suffering, and dying. Hey, if you want into pride, being acclaimed, being applauded, if you're into that, man, if you want to operate out of your ego, man, if you're into performance and microphones and how big my name is, and hey, I'm bigger than you are, and more people know my name, and I give out more autographs than you do, if you're into that, man, then go someplace else, because this is about bleeding, suffering, and dying. Pour your life out. Always be redemptive. Never, ever, ever live for yourself. That's what this is about. This is about the style of the cross, and I'm calling you to it. I'm not just calling you to go to a cross. No. I'm not just calling you to have a cross experience and then, wipe your hands and that's done. You know, I'm supposed to go to the altar at least once. Well, when should I go? Oh, well, Saturday night during revival. That's when I'll go because that's when the crowd is the smallest. So then I can have the least humiliation. And I'll go down, pray for a while, and then it'll be all over. Whew, glad that's over with now. Got that under my belt. Don't want to have to do that again. See, it's not that kind of a deal. This is about a lifestyle. This is about a thought process. This is about a whole flow of life. This is about the essence of living. This is about the nature of God spilling through your being. This is about all that God is in terms of bleeding, suffering, and dying, literally gripping you and moving through you. That's what this is all about. So he's calling them to a bleeding, suffering, dying. In fact, look how strong he is on this. Verse 24 again. If anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man will come in the glory of his Father with his angels. Then he will reward each according to his works. Assuredly, I say to you, there are some standing here who shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Listen to the key words. Verse 25. Whoever desires to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Oh, do you get the principle? Hey, it's backwards. The way up is down. The way in is out. The way to live is to die. The way to win is to lose. Hey, how you doing in your life? Oh, I'm losing, man. That's the kingdom, brother. That's the kingdom. For in losing, you win. Hey, how you doing in your life? Oh, I'm dying, man. Well, good. That's the secret, man. Because in dying, you live. See, in giving up, you get the whole reversal process. Everything opposite of our world. That's what he's calling them to. It's the style of the cross. Guys, this is the way we're going to win our world. We're not going to win our world with hotshot programs. We're not going to win our world with big-time deals. We're not going to win our world in massive productions. We're not going to win our world with church growth programs. Guys, I'm calling you to the absolute loss of your life. I'm calling you to intersect your world. Intersect your world. Intersect the need and the hurt of your world. And when you intersect the need and the hurt of your world, a cross is produced, and when a cross is produced, blood is spilled, and redemption comes from that blood. You are to be an extension of the blood process of Christ. I'm calling you to let me fill you, live my life through you. What kind of life am I going to live? Bleeding, suffering, and dying. It's the nature of God. Do you want to be close to Him? Do you want to be intimate with Him? Do you want oneness with God? Do you want to know what it is to have your life and His life to be so tight that they are the same? Do you want intimacy with Him? Oh God, bathe me in yourself. Literally pour your life all over me. Is that what you want? The very nature of God? Do you want to be a partaker of the divine nature? You satisfied with ceremonies, programs, doing certain things? Or do you really want to get in tight? Do you want to know oneness? Do you literally want to be involved with Him? Do you really want to know the depth of His nature within you? Do you really want to have the mind that is in Christ Jesus? Do you want to know the throbbing heart of God? Do you want to live in the very pulse beat of the divine? Do you want to know the very flow of His life in and through you? How is all that going to happen? Hey, it's going to be spilling out in the style of the cross. For if that ever takes place in here, the natural out here is the style of the cross. It's the essence of what it's all about. He's calling us to that. He's taken His disciples aside. He's looked them right in the eye. He's given the preliminary question, but that's only a brief start just to get your feet wet. Let me bring you to the prominent question. Who do you say that I am? Come to the depth of that. But when you know who I am, Christ, the Son of the living God, do you know the content of that thing? Do you know what that thing really means, man? Do you know what it really means to be the Christ, the Son of the living God? I'm telling you, it means to bleed, suffer, and die. This is my style. This is the way I think. This is the way I am. This is the operation of my life. This is the nature of my very being. Here's where I'm headed, guys. I'm headed for a cross. We're going to redeem our world, and we're going to do it through the bleeding, suffering, dying style of a cross. Will you join me? The Apostle Paul is so strong on this. He talks in 1 Corinthians about bearing in his body the dying of the Lord Jesus. Oh, I bear in my body the dying. It's the living dying. The very death of Christ. I want to stay there because you see, it's not coming to death and then out of that comes life. No, it's not that at all. It's not coming to death and out of that comes life. No. Do you understand? It's coming to death and staying in death. Because it's only in the death that you experience life. It's only in the dying. So you have to continue to die. I die daily. It's in continuing to die that you know life. Do you know His life? Have you embraced the style of the cross? Do you know the wonder of Him living within you? And if you know the wonder of Him living within you, and you've embraced Him at the point of the cross, and you've come to crucifixion, then man, out of your fingertips is going to come what? Servanthood. Spill your life out. Never ever live for yourself. And see, you can't make that. Doesn't matter how hard you try. You can't make that happen at the end of your fingertips unless you've experienced it in here. It has to come from the nature. See, what we're after is not certain forms and or so many pairs of feet a week. And no, come on, we're not humility, acting like us. We're not after that. What we're after is the spontaneous flow of the Spirit of God, literally moving through you, spilling in a redemptive process to your world, so your world begins to understand and know the reality of the style of the cross, and the life of Jesus is reproduced in our day. Man, you got to get that. You got to have that. So we're calling you. He's calling you. He's calling you along with His disciples to the style of the cross. Oh, to know Him in the power of His resurrection and the fellowship of His suffering. Oh, to embrace Him in His cross, that His dying might spill through me, and the redemptive flow of His blood, I might be a channel through which the redemptive flow of His blood can literally penetrate my world. Oh, to know Him in the depth of His cross.